What a week. There's been a lot going on in the world around us. We passed through the celebration of Martin Luther King's birthday that calls to our minds the history of the South in the United States as the center of the civil rights movement. Then there was the inauguration of our new president, President Donald Trump, at Washington, bringing to the forefront the events that have taken place in that city where 45 new presidents have taken office. The next day, the women marched on Washington. It brought back to memories for some of us the day of the March on Washington when the streets in the area around the Capitol were filled with people. Once again, in the midst of a time of turmoil. It's been a week. We have no idea what will be involved as the result of what has taken place during this week. There were both good things and difficult things. We've received news of tornadoes ripping through the South, of families losing their homes and some losing their loved ones in the process. In some ways, you might say, well, it's just another average week in the world that we live in these days. It kind of brings us back to the reading from the gospel this morning. As we find the region of Galilee being known as the area of the Galilee of the Gentiles. It had a long history of being filled with people who had been marginalized by the world around them. A number of conquerors down through the centuries had taken over the area. They had taken the strongest and the brightest from among the people to other lands and left behind the weakest and the poorest. It was not a place that was filled with a lot of the rich and powerful. In fact, there were very few that were either rich or powerful in that region. And we see Jesus coming down the road, walking along the seacoast, looking at his surroundings, remembering the history of the area and also knowing that this was the place that he was going to establish the center for his ministry in the heart of Israel, near the Sea of Galilee, in the fishing village of Capernaum. The Sea of Galilee is actually a freshwater lake. But the storms would often come up on that freshwater lake as the winds came down from off the Mediterranean coast and down through the valleys and the crevices that led to this low spot, so to speak. And a storm could whip up at any time without any sense of warning or any kind of Doppler radar to tell them what was coming. Jesus arrives. And a new wind, a fresh wind, blows in to the region. He walks along the seacoast and he sees these fishermen out with their nets, casting their nets out into the water, doing what they've been doing throughout their lifetime. fishing for fish. And he invites them. He says, come and follow me, and I'll show you how to fish for people. I'll show you how to make a difference in the lives of people, so to speak. And they apparently had no idea as to what they were getting themselves into in that process, as most of us kind of pass through life and sometimes don't realize what we're getting ourselves into at, well, some given moment at a time. So these fishermen drop their net and start to follow him. And he walks a little further down the edge of the lake, the Sea of Galilee. Sees some more fishermen, 2 fishermen out with their dad. They're mending the net. Apparently they had done some fishing, enough fishing that at least they had damaged their nets in the process. It was a family business, you get the feeling. He'd been involved in this for who knows how long. And Jesus sees these 2 fishermen, and he invites them to come and follow him. And immediately, we're told, they drop their nets, leave Dad behind, and follow Jesus. Sounds rather simple and straightforward, except in that region, in that time, in that world, and in that culture, family was very important. And so for these 2 boys to leave old Dad back there in the boat by himself probably was viewed as being kind of an affront to him. Nevertheless, there was something about Jesus' call that enabled these fishermen to follow Jesus. Again, they had no idea as to what they were getting themselves into, and that's kind of what it's like sometimes when you follow Jesus. You don't know exactly what you're getting yourself into, or where it's going to lead, or what it's going to do to you and to your life and to people that you love and people that are a part of your, well, association, so to speak. Because when Jesus enters the picture and when we say yes to Jesus, it's time to really hang on. It's to hang on because you don't know what you don't know about where that's going to lead you in your faithfulness to following Jesus the Christ. This was the 3rd move for Jesus. Did you know that? The first move took place right after he was born, when he left Bethlehem and as a babe and went down to Egypt and spent time down there until it was safe for him to come back. And he came back and he went to his hometown there in Nazareth. That was the 2nd move for Jesus. Everything that he knew about life up until this particular point, all of his boyhood was lived in that, well, that place where they say, can anything good come from Nazareth? And then he makes this move. He goes down to the Sea of Galilee, into this land of misfits, so to speak, where people from various cultures and backgrounds across the known world at that particular time, who had been brought there in exile, who didn't have a whole lot in the way of this world's goods, who didn't have people that were in places of power, didn't have the kind of influence that, well, the kinds of things that we look for when we have people who are in places of leadership. So he calls for fishermen. He sets up the center for his ministry there in Capernaum, that little fishing village, and it is from there that he moves out and about into the area around Galilee. Again, moving about those people who had been disenfranchised, those people who the rest of the world didn't really care a whole lot about or for. And he continued to reach out to them, offering them love and grace, healing all their sicknesses and diseases. You kind of get the feeling that in the day and the age in which we live, that Jesus really has a place right here in this great country that we're a part of. We don't know exactly where that particular location would be for his ministry. Should he walk again on the face of the earth? If he were here in this country, where would he establish his center for ministry? I suspect he would be ministering again among those folks who felt on the outside looking in. Those folks who were in need. Those folks whose lives are, well, kind of disheveled, to say the least. He'd be moving about not the movers and the shakers of the land so much as he would among ordinary folk. People who have hurts and hopes and dreams. People who are in need of the kind of gift that he has to offer them of his grace and his love and the healing of bodies and minds and spirits. We get the feeling that he would be involved in places that, well, some of us have probably never seen. And so the ministry goes on. The ministry went on from that time forward, following the death of his friend John, who would soon have his head removed for being faithful and calling the king to the reality of his own, well, life of debauchery. It cost Jesus a lot too. It cost him his life, which he freely gave for all of us. There's a sense that there's a foreshadowing of the cross even in the very beginning of Jesus' ministry as he moves about seeking to proclaim God's good news to a people that have sat in a great deal of darkness, who've experienced the pain of being less than that which they'd probably hoped that they could be. So as we find ourselves here at the very early beginnings of the new year, we're seeking to find ways that we can somehow, in some way, continue that ministry. We saw it happen here this weekend as people who were hungry received food and were fed. We saw it the first week of the year in those who came and shared in the ministry of Night's Welcome. And that was not an easy task. It was something that required a lot of people. There were, well, shall I say, surprises that were a part of that experience for those who were involved. But life can be messy sometimes. We might feel that this day, as we gather here, there's something in our life that's in need of the touch of the Master's hand. We may be hurting in body or mind or spirit. We might be dealing with brokenness in relationships. We might be struggling to come to a place of understanding of God's vision for this congregation, for both the short term and the middle term and the long term, as we seek to be faithful disciples who are, well, fishing for yet more followers. I suspect those fishermen were surprised by the things that Jesus invited them into and enabled them to be a part of in those days. And I get the feeling we can be surprised as well as we discover what God is calling us to do and to be as a part of that ongoing ministry of fishing for followers. Not for followers of us, but for followers of Jesus Christ, which includes the mission of the church of making disciples for Jesus Christ, for the transformation of the world. We'll probably see some new things in this coming year. We probably will be surprised by some of them. We may agree with some of them. We may disagree with some of them. But if God's in the midst of it, if God gets involved with what we're doing, and if we get involved with what God is calling us to do, success will be a part of it. Because lives will be touched and transformed and renewed, even through us. A surprising day in a surprising world, a world not so different from the one we find ourselves in now. So may God enable us to be in tune with the one who has called us. Come, follow me, and I'll show you how to be a fisher for people. May we seek to be in tune with the Spirit of the living Christ, who's continuing to reach out to this world in which we live and move and have our being, that his kingdom come, that his will be done here on earth as it is in heaven. So be it. Thanks be to God for the gift of his call. May he empower us to fulfill it. Amen.